All right, welcome everyone. So this is session number 1 of the exam prep for the MCD 1. In other words, the MuleSoft Certified Developer Level 1 exam. So welcome, whether you're in person or whether you are going to be watching this video later, and your commitment to conquer this certification is well noted. I would have to say, in the list of different certifications in the MuleSoft space I've taken, that this one is probably one of the harder ones to do. After MCD1, I think hyperautomation ranks as a pretty tough one. And then also the MCIA, which is the MuleSoft Certified Integration Architect. So anyway, here to help you conquer this. It's all about being prepared. So as many of you know me, nickname is Digital D. I'm also Diane Kessler, certified instructor, but glad to have you here to automate, innovate, and dominate. And I mean that because any exam that's out there is passable. I've had a lot of students or people in the industry that could not pass this particular exam or could not pass the hyperautomation. There's some of them are really challenged by it. And I mean like 5 to 6 retakes. And the biggest element that I have to say that makes a difference, and you'll hear this, I heard it even recently from one of our team members that recently passed, is to get hands-on with the material. You might be in a class and you can go through the entire use case of that class. And at that time, you're learning the concepts and doing the work and might understand the concepts pretty well. It makes sense, it's logical. But then you sit for the exam and you're faced with scenario questions and or code blocks of syntax, and you're just blown away. It's like, wait a minute, maybe I didn't know it so well. One of the stories I had with a student that I was, had been in one of my classes, and his goal was to take the class with me to review the concepts. And he reviewed the concepts and sat for the exam. And it was either the 4th or 5th time, I don't recall for sure, but he did not pass again. And so he reached out to me, because in every class I tell, the students basically that I'm here for you. If you want to reach out to me afterwards, I'll coach you, not a problem. So he did, and he was like, I didn't pass again. And I said, send me your report. And he sent at the end of each, after you take the exam, if you don't pass it, it's okay. Just do it as an opportunity to see what the exam's like, what those questions are that you might be totally lost in. And I told him, write down those questions that you're not clear on there, that are the objective that you did not understand. And so he did. He got that information. He gave me his report, and it shows you the areas you're weakest in. And I challenged him to take one of those objectives, and I gave him a challenge that he had to A, create a presentation, and B, create a flow that showed the presentation, kind of like a proof of concept, to explain to me everything about that particular objective. And he did. And then we were ready. One of some of the feedback that he gave me at that time was, wow, I thought I knew it, but until you actually have to present on it or explain a demo, you really don't know it. He said, and I realized it at that time. So that was a win. And then he was going to do another objective, and came back to me and said, I went and did that in a few other areas and I passed. So he passed. So I share all that with you to say that some of these technical certifications require you to really understand how it's working and what it's doing, like a deeper dive. So learn in layers. And what I intend to do with this series really is to go over some of the objectives so that areas that you might be weaker in, you can come back and say, hey, Diane, that objective on, managing records, I really need, some more work in that area. So I'll give you some challenges that you can do. And I'm going to challenge you through this program also to do just that, to create a presentation, to create a POC, and you're going to be presenting next Tuesday in certain areas that you find that you might need to have a stronger knowledge of. Okay, so here we go. Welcome to the course. Our whole idea behind this is, let me get my, there we go. Our whole idea behind this is to not just pass the exam. I want you to really know this. Why? Because you're going to be using it on the job. I don't want you to show up, ready to do, ready to be a developer, and you really don't have an understanding of the concepts. But I do want to point out to you that this certification means, if you look at the actual specifications of what this certification means, it means that you are able to work on a project with a senior architect or with coaching. So it's not like you need to show up and this certification means you better own it. It doesn't mean that. It means that you are effectively a developer on the team being led by some type of senior representative of your team on that job. Okay, so I wanted to point that out too. But in the whole process as well, the MuleSoft course, the proper course, we work with the American flights. And so that whole use case can be applied to different industries. If you're in healthcare or if you're in, manufacturing, just substitute some of those databases or, some of the connections that you make in that to other industries and be able to come up with your own use case. So I encourage that. In our process here, the use case that we're going to end up using is one that we use, which is centered around healthcare, and it's a patient. Okay. So at any rate, that is where you can apply and draw those parallels, even from a classroom environment over into a real world project. And, have the mindset that the tool is constantly changing. And so you want to stay up to date with the latest changes and trends. And I share that with you to say that right now you are going to see Studio. We're going to be working in Studio. And on the horizon, not just on the horizon, it's actually been released quite a bit ago, but it's maturing, is Anypoint Code Builder. Well, the exam is focused on Studio. They have not added questions in regards to Anypoint Code Builder until MuleSoft or Salesforce releases official curriculum using that product. Then they are at liberty to, include questions about Anypoint Code Builder. So do you have to do a deep dive in Anypoint Code Builder? Not at this time. If you're learning and you're learning on Studio and that's what's in the curriculum, that's where your focus will be. Another change that's about to take place as well, it hasn't been officially done yet, but another change is going to be using the differences or the two different specification languages that we have. We've got RAML and we've got OAS. Okay. And RAML is you're going to find out as we go deeper, is, that RAML has special features that OAS does not have at this time. They're working on maturing some of the features of OAS, but I do know that the MuleSoft curriculum is going to be changed over to using OAS. And RAML is going to be a secondary, whereas right now, RAML is the primary. So you do need to skill up on OAS. Is it on the exam? If it's on the exam at all, it's just going to talk about it being another possible opportunity for writing specifications. But it won't be, it's not at the forefront. So that's another one. So Studio, Anypoint Code Builder, RAML versus OAS. These are all elements that are going to be transitioning and being, updated going forward at some point in time. But as it sits right now, the exam should be based on the current curriculum that prepares you for this exam, which is if you've taken the fundamentals, either instructor-led with me or one of our instructors, or have taken the self-paced, because you can take the self-paced course as well. And that's what's present there. All right. So our agenda, we're going to have 6 live sessions. They're recorded. So if you have, work conflicts and can't make it during the time frame, that's fine. The recordings will appear in the invitation. And if you are not part of the invitations, then they're also going to be put up on YouTube as well. So you'll be able to find them there. We're going to go over the core concepts, those objectives on the exam. We're going to have some hands-on as well in different segments. And then you're going to have the final exam prep and best tips on passing that exam or any of the exams. That'll carry over into, any exam you sit for. So my goal is to really help you to, take ownership of this. And part of that is your challenge, your mastery challenge. And that's where I'm going to have you, start building a system API, start working with some of these things. As we go through, you're going to have this study deck. This is going to be a study deck that I'm building out as we go through this whole process. And you'll get copies of this as it's, in each increment as we go forward. And then, as we also have the exam, some of the exam questions, we'll go over some of those questions. I've got some that are auto-generated and some that I've created myself. So we're going to have a session on that as well for next week. So the 6 live sessions in this case are going to run this week and next week. We're queued up to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for both for this week. However, I'm going to have to make an adjustment for next Thursday. I'm going to have to offset that and I'll let you know and announce that time. We'll collaborate and see what's going to work best for everybody. But I will not be at a place where I can teach on next Thursday. So anyway, so the exam. The exam itself is 60 questions, 120 minutes. So that means you have 2 hours. You've got 2 minutes per question. So some of the questions you'll find that you can answer them pretty quickly. It might be a pretty simple question. And I'll go over actually looking at a question, deciphering how to analyze the question, how to pick out and read different keywords, and how to, speed up your time per each question anyway. But if you get a question and they're there, my apologies, I didn't write some of these, but when you get a question that is very long and very complex, do not labor and take a long time on that. Watch your time frame and make sure that you get all the way to the end of the exam. I've had people tell me that they get all the way to that they didn't get to the end of the exam. They couldn't even finish. And that's really unfortunate because there likely are questions at the end of that exam that are easier. And so you labor over something complex when really mark it for review and keep going and make sure you get to the end and then come back to it. So anyway, you only need 42 correct answers. So if that's one of the ones that you want to forfeit because it's too complex and move forward to some of the others, give it your best shot. You may even be getting it right. But, some of them, I have been on the board to write the exams. I have written, it's 3 or 4. I think it's 3 of the exams that are out there. And when we are writing those exams and they're following the national standard for exam certifications, which we did, we had a great coach in that. She knows who she is. But it was not to write questions that were ambiguous or were trick questions, and the answers had to be very, very appropriate, but not a trick answer either. So, I do understand how some of the questions should be. I have taken exams and they are not, some of the other exams don't adhere to that. So again, just I'll give you more detail when we're on that segment of, how to focus on actually deciphering the question. Multiple choice. Okay, so these questions are going to be multiple choice. That's you're going to have either choose one or choose multiple answers. Watch it on the choose multiple answers because it's either 100% right or 100% wrong. If you get one of them right and one of them wrong, you don't get a half a point. Okay, so it's 100% black and white, right or wrong. So be careful and make sure that if it says choose 3, I didn't write any of those because I don't like them. When I had the opportunity to write questions, I wasn't going to do that. So at any rate, there are a lot of scenario based. Okay. And again, I'll share strategy on that because scenario based is you got to put your hat on, thinking like MuleSoft wants you to think. So in this session today, I'm going to go over some of that, like terminology, mindset, how you want to think, how you want to operate, and answer those questions. One of the bigger challenges I've had with some of the coaching I've done is and that, someone will have like vast experience in the integration industry. Like they've worked with other companies, they've worked with other products, and now they're trying to answer questions that are specific to the MuleSoft or Salesforce thought process. And they're having to rethink. That was one person's demise, is that they're like, I wouldn't do it that way, really, but this is how they want us to do it. And that's what they had to rethink and conquered the exam. So, it's all about understanding the thought process. And some of it is based around best practices. I will share that with you as well. We don't want to create what is known as a point-to-point solution, where someone who has deep experience in the industry will say, why not? Well, because that's going to take away from the setting up the structure of API-led and decoupling those different processes for reusability. Okay, so sometimes it's a good rethinking. We're change agents. Years ago when I was developing and writing programs, I wrote a real long, nice long application. Were any pieces of that reusable? No. When I left that company, who managed that? They had to manage my work. Whereas if we decouple them and have them in different smaller components in a pattern and a standardized structure like API led, it's easier to maintain and have reusable pieces. So anyway, that's an example of getting the mindset of how we want to think when we're taking this exam. And those concepts are part of the objectives of this exam. All right, focused on Mule 4, there should be no question about that. Go back about 5 years, there was Mule 3 and Mule 4 on the exam. You don't have to worry about that. This is 100% on Mule 4. And we're going to go over some of these topics and then some that are listed there, as well as, I want the goal of this certification. This is one of the elements of this certification. Can you build a Mule app? Do you know how to deploy it? Do you know how to debug it? Do you know what the XML code looks like? Okay. And if you're like, wow, I didn't know I had to learn it. You don't have to be an XML engineer, but you need to be able to look at the code enough to say, oh, I know what that means. Okay. So we've got other languages at play here. RAML, okay, specification language. Another one, DataWeave. DataWeave is a functional programming language. That's why this exam is one of the harder ones, is because we've got a lot of different languages that we need to be aware of. Do you have to be a DataWeave, expert? No. But you need to understand the concepts and the code and the syntax enough. Okay. All righty. So that's kind of about the exam. Now let me show you also, and you probably know some of this anyway, but let's go ahead and cover it here also. Some of these links I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat of this meeting, and then we'll publish them also or have them available for you to use. There you go. All right, so this is the MuleSoft, or I should say trailhead location for where the exam details are. All right, years ago, for those of you retaking it that had it years ago and lost it, it's no longer in the training.mulesoft.com space. It's moved over to Trailhead. Okay, so it's over here now. You won't find it where it was before. And so this is, you'll find this for each of the exams. The MuleSoft developer one is here, and you can, see high level links to take you to different places. But the first one is the exam guide. So when you click on this link, it's going to take you here. Okay. And again, I've given you the initial one, so we'll go through some of this. But the things that are here are, about the exam, who the audience should be, and it's going to list some of the objectives we're talking about, the purpose, some of the things I already brought in. There's pricing here. It's $200. That's not bad. The architect exams are $400. So $200 for the exam. If you have to retake it, it's $100. The exam used to come with the instructor-led class. It does not come with the instructor-led class anymore. Everyone has to buy it. Okay, so it is here. And there's some training resources. This is where you're going to find the self-paced fundamentals if you haven't taken that already, or the actual instructor-led course is probably here somewhere. This one, that's the instructor-led. So these both, so that you should find the self-study material there or the instructor-led one. Little pricey, but if your company can pay for that, that's great. But otherwise, the exam outline. Now, this is my focus here. I'm going to be having and already have some of the slides already mapped out for creating application networks, designing our APIs. Each of these objectives, we may not go in the order that you see here, but each of these objectives will be covered in this series that we're doing. Now, what I want to point out to you, this percentage means that that's the percentage of content that you can expect on the exam. Okay, so that's pretty helpful. And knowing that, okay, so creating application networks is like 7%. Structuring Mule apps, 10%. Accessing and modifying Mule events, 10%. Okay, so in areas that we can see the percentages higher or lower are going to give you an indication of how well you should know something. Okay, and you can see what's listed below them. And a lot of this we will be, addressing or going over. So if you have any questions, please, raise your hand. Feel free to ask questions. We can go over those when we get to them. Or if you're watching this in video form, reach out to me. I'll go ahead and you should be able to have my contact information from this invitation, or also to make sure you have it in the comments of this video. All right, so at any rate, we will be going over these because it's 6 sessions and just a couple hours per session. Some of this is going to come in the form of homework and you presenting on some of it. So I know areas that are pain points for most people, most students. So we'll determine that. So in other words, what I'm getting at is your challenge might be different from someone else's. So based on, what your needs are, we'll do those. All right, so there's some exam code of conduct things here also, and, maintaining our certification. This is big. This is huge because it used to be that the certification was good for 2 years, and then you had to retake the exam or retake a maintenance exam that was half the number of questions. They are not doing that anymore. Okay, once you are certified, it's good for a year, and you do what is a maintenance program that is like an in-service, and it took me less than like 10 minutes. It was just like, a couple of trailheads of newer products, of newer features. So know that once you've taken it, then your maintenance is a module on Trailhead once a year. Okay, so really nice as far as that's concerned. All right, so yeah, that really was helpful. Okay, so let's look at a couple things off of this also. I went over also to the, let me close that. That is the courses. There is also a self-paced that is not showing here. If you need the self-paced and you haven't found that yet, ping me and let me know. I think most of you in this group have found it already, but let me go back to the main page here of scheduling it. Okay, scheduling it. And this is, if you do not have an account already with Criterion, you're going to have to create an account. Okay, if you had a previous, those of you from years ago, if you have a web assessor account, you can use that and it'll populate. So there's a way you have to merge them. But if you're brand new, you'll create a new account here. And see if I can get mine to log in from here. I think I need to be in another browser, but second. But you do want to create an account out here and go ahead and get familiar with this site, put your profile information in. There we go. Okay, so I've got my login details saved here. So once you've created an account with them, there's in the upper right, it says create new account. So you can see that. And they're about to change this. So heads up, go ahead and get this situated because a lot of times they'll just go ahead and modify and bring it over. But in July, they're going to be changing this over to Pearson VUE. I've taken several exams on that platform, so it'll be good. And then you can come down to scheduling an exam when you're ready. And so some details are in here you'll learn about this, you'll learn about setting up your computer and various things. Basically, it's online and proctored if you're doing the online. And your basic workspace will have to be completely cleared off because they'll take a video. You'll have to use your camera to scan your area and some details like that. I'll go over that on our last day a little bit more too. But do in the meantime get this account set up so that you are ready to schedule your exam when it comes time. Okay, and then go ahead.
Since things have changed, I would go to criterion.com. You were saying that you have an older login, so I should go to criterion.com. I'm looking at it right now. It looks pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Making sure I'm in the right spot.
Yeah, if it looks pretty straightforward, if it looked like this login page, then you're in the right place.
Okay.
Here's the link. Let me put this in the chat because it's actually a web assessor. It's a web assessor address URL with Salesforce at the end of it.
All right, got it.
Yeah. And then of course, any of this stuff in the chat we'll post down in the comments underneath this video so you have it. All right, so you want to get that set up. That's another thing. There's another in the exam guide. Under the exam guide, there is another, let me see, if you go to recommended training and resources, that will be, where is it? Was it practice exam? Okay. That is where our practice exam is. Okay. So coming to you in the chat on this, and we'll label each one of them. So there's a couple different links there. But in this area is where all of the MuleSoft exams are. Okay, so starting at the top is the MuleSoft Associate. Okay, then the Hyperautomation Specialist. And then you'll come down to the MuleSoft Developer. And down below are Developer 2 and the Architect. Okay, so here is a link to the exam guide. That brings us, let me go ahead and right click on this one, show you this one. It brings us back to that other page. Okay, so that's where you can get to that. And then we also have the practice exam. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on that practice exam because we're going to be centering around the objectives, and the exam questions refer to each of the objectives. So in the list here are some of the practice exams. Now, it's okay, but I definitely go through them and understand what the question is. I will use some of them as an example to coach you of how to read a question, but I don't want you to feel that when you have all the answers correct on the practice exam that you're ready to sit for the main exam because the questions are different and your scenario questions are going to be more of a challenge than what you're seeing on this practice exam. Okay. So at any rate, I do want you, this is downloadable. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and download a fresh copy of this. There you go. And then you can work off of that downloadable PDF. Okay. So anyway, that is, what I intended to share on any point platform. There's one other spot. I'm trying to find one other spot that you can go to that kind of has the trailhead. I know this is just taking us to these other hyperlinks, but where is that's the proctored, that's that. Practice exam, maybe it's this. No, that's going to be the offerings. That's not it. Yeah, there's a link. Let me see if I can find it up here. Yeah. Not that one. I'm going to go back to this one. There's a whole trailhead. Yes, here it is. Maybe this is it. Developer. There's a whole, oh, it brought me back here. Darn it. Classes and workshops. That's not it. I'll find it and share it in our next session because there is a actual trailhead. RJ, do you know the one I'm talking about?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay. There's one that'll bring you to, there's the maintenance, by the way. Cert prep, maybe it's this one. Yeah. Platform developer. I'll double check because I want to make sure this is the right one. This isn't. I don't think this is the right one because the percentages are different. This is a Salesforce one. I'll find it. There is a trailhead like that actually handles will guide you through step by step. I'll locate that. I thought they should have it linked in here somewhere. Maybe it's a pre-work for, yeah, I'll locate it. I'm not going to burn time on that. But anyway, you would think it would be listed in everything here, but I'm not seeing it. Anyway, all right, so we'll share more on that later. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in and start with one of our objectives. Now, like I said, I'm going to cover different objectives, but they won't necessarily be in the same order that you saw on the, that listing we just saw. Okay, so one of them is creating an application network. Okay, and in the focus of an application network, it brings up the concept of API-led. Okay, and the difference between API-led and transitioning over into creating an application network out of all of those components. So what we want to think about is in the process of building out a solution it is an architectural style. So when we build out the solution using the architectural style of API-led, we want to, let me bring this over here. We want to have the focus of why that's so important. It helps us to understand why something matters versus just going with it, and just saying, oh, we're going to do it this way because, okay, well, it happens to matter where we've been as to where we're going. So I'm going to overlay this with a story of why it matters. Okay. And this is going to bring us down to two resources that I highly recommend. One of them is where the REST methodology came from. Why do we follow RESTful practices when it comes to APIs? Roy Thomas Fielding in 2000 had a dissertation that he put together the recommendations for the structure of the REST methodology. So that's pretty helpful and interesting to read through. And the links are here. And again, we'll pop them in the chat or in the description. So I would recommend just flipping through it. It's pretty fascinating that originally there wasn't any kind of standard. And so he was at the forefront with a committee of building out the different, architectural styles and designs. Also, another one is enterprise integration patterns. And that is another great resource also that I would recommend as an architect. So it all comes down to where it all begins. It all began, and I'm guilty of this, of writing down applications, and I needed to connect one system to another. So I wrote the code. I wrote a whole application in COBOL. Okay. We're talking years ago. And so I wrote the whole application, compiled it, put it into use, and one system could easily talk to another system, the entire thing. Then over time, you start building out additional, another one, and a new feature comes about. And so we want to go ahead and add in more and more additional separate programs, right? And they work good. As long as I was there and I documented it well, I could go in and fix it and make changes and things like that. But then we had a couple other systems come in. We have to integrate them with this system. Another one had to be written here. So see all of these individual programs. And over time, this happens. That's called spaghetti integration.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard to support fixing this or changing out a system. If we look at the connections for this system right here, if we had to change out that system, we have all of these connections that we have to now rewrite that application for. That each line represents a different program, a different application in its entirety, point to point. So supporting that is a headache. It doesn't even make sense. I mean, sometimes it's an easy fix. Now, I was on a state project, actually, and MuleSoft was new to them. And so we're on board to use MuleSoft. And the big deal with some of the architects and the developers were, hey, we don't know MuleSoft. We've got to learn it to do it. So why don't we just use .NET? It's another language. No, we're using MuleSoft. They didn't want to. The developers didn't. So they didn't have the understanding in their mind why this was important. Okay. So when you hear about point to point and understand what it represents, we start to see the importance of, learning to do things a little different. When you're a change agent, and I employ this with a lot of my architects that I'm coaching, you've got to stand on principles and understand why and teach them why it's important. And this is a concept for the MCD one. Why API led is so important. Why it takes the IT department so long to make changes. Or they look at a system that needs to be put to rest. Right? They need to put this system in, it's an older system that needs to be replaced with more modern technology, more, really changing their whole landscape to where they are more digitally efficient. And so as you are facing situations like this and you understand the importance of making that change, then you start moving into why API is such a powerful solution. Why API led? Okay, so then we progressed a little bit. And instead of having the systems directly talking to each other, if that went down, then what would happen is we could incorporate another element, and we called it a hub. Some people still call it a hub, but what it is a queue. Okay, we've seen them in our material, a VM queue, a JMS queue. There's any point MQ, so a queue, right? You put a message in that queue, and the other system goes, oh, I have a message. I'm going to pick that up. Okay, so we've seen that in some of our curriculum already. And so the message queue became a great solution because what it does do is it allows you to have something in the middle there that manages for security, manages for visibility into where that message is, what's going on. So that point to point is less involved there, and what we now have is a center hub, or more modern terms, a queue.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that gives them all the opportunity of working together. Then another step forward is what is called an enterprise service bus. All right, the federal contract I was on, or I was actually employed at that one, but the federal one I was on used MuleSoft, because MuleSoft is great at this, as an enterprise service bus. So the blue that you're seeing, the big square of the blue that you're seeing in the middle, is a Mule runtime, or a location to deploy your Mule apps to. So Mule does this beautifully. In fact, that federal entity is still using it as an enterprise service bus. And what that means basically is that the Mule apps in this case, now we're just calling them integration services, but what that means is the Mule apps are being used here as a way of connecting both of those systems, but they are still not as decoupled as they could be. They're not as reusable as they could be. It's better, but we're not there yet. Okay. And a great example that I like to use to kind of drill in your mind of what an enterprise service bus is on a Windows system. Those of you on Macs, you're gonna have other ways of seeing this, but on a Windows system, we have services. Okay, so this is where I want you to think about what is a service, what is an enterprise service bus. This is like a mini example of what an enterprise service bus is. So you have on a Windows system are services. Okay, if you look at these, they're all different services that work in different ways on my system. I can manage them in one location. And that's a benefit of Mule being an enterprise service bus, because now you're not point to point out there all over the place. All of your integrations are in one place, and you can manage them, and you can see when they're broke. I can see when they're broke. I can see when they're not running. I can pause them. I can change them out. I can decommission them. So as far as managing them and governing them, it's a good thing, right? But is it still the best solution? The best solution comes as we jump forward into what is known as API led. And I've got a great picture, actually. This one is a little harder to grasp the message. I've got a better image that I will share with you also, but this is where we dive into API led. And what starts happening is the red dotted lines are to represent an API. Okay, something that's already built. And in this case, you can see that these APIs are going to be in existence already on any point platform. Okay, so this one's a healthcare example. So I am incorporating this insurance plan API here between these different, between the mainframe here and also the integration services. But it also can be part of the radiology imaging, could use that insurance plan API. So you start having a lot of reusability happening. And the idea behind it is having these assets be part of what we use for our solutions and the solutioning. So as we're going through and we are like, let's say in our use case, I need to connect to Athena Health because I have on this project that I'm on that we need to integrate an AS400 with Athena. Kind of true story. The hospital I have been that I had treatment at has an AS400. and I have records in Athena Healthcare. Okay. So if I want to build out a solution and I need to connect that system with an API, and as I'm solutioning this, I'm getting a screen ready over here for you. As I'm solutioning this, I know that on the MuleSoft side, that there is a API, or I should say there is a connector that will use the AS400. Okay. So if I go to provided by MuleSoft, there's AS400. There is a Mule4 connector, pre-built. I don't have to spend the time of writing that integration piece. It's here. I would bring this into my Mule app, connect to that AS400 with the configurations from the hospital. And now I got to go over to Athena Healthcare, right? I need to like bring data from one to the other. But now Athena Healthcare is a big guy on the EHR side, right? They're electronic health records, so they're a big guy. How am I going to get into their system? Okay, so now I'm going to see if they have any APIs. All right, so I come to their site and I find out, hey, they've got API led, or they've got APIs. Okay, now put in your mind, I'm doing a solution API led. Get it? API led. I'm going to find APIs. Let's check out their APIs. So I look in here and you can come down to check out their sandbox.
Huh.
Look at this. Appointments. Get requests. Put. Post. API led. Oh my gosh. This is familiar to me. So I can click on some of these and see what the required fields are, what my response is going to look like. This is the Athena Healthcare's exchange. So now I am building out a solution with the API standards of using REST APIs. And I can see that I can use components like this and speed up my solution. I don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Their developers have put together many different kinds of APIs here that I can subscribe to, get security credentials for, and then bring that back into my Mule app and integrate my AS400 records into Athena. Now I'll probably have to take the data from the AS400 and transform it to match what is needed here, right? And in healthcare, it's different standards. There's a FHIR 4 standard versus an HL7. That's another whole topic. But to share with you what data is needed and what is required, then you start to see why API-led is so important. So this diagram doesn't speak that as strongly as maybe, let me grab this next one, as maybe this one does. Okay. So there's my Mule app. I'm pulling in different connectors. I'm integrating. Let's pretend one of those was Athena's, and I'm bringing in that Athena API. And this is where we start talking about the API solutioning. Okay, API solutioning. So there are other repositories, other areas. Like I just, because I know Athena, wanted to see if Athena has something there. So what if you go to API Gurus, APIs Gurus, and this is a repository of over 2,000 different APIs that you can search for. Let's say you wanted to connect to something in Google. Okay, and it's going to bring up a bunch of different Google options here. You know, maybe Google Storage, Google Blog, you know, wherever you're wanting to integrate with. So when you start realizing that, hey, there's a lot of APIs out here, not just there, but not just in AnyPoint Exchange, but also companies provide APIs, because this is the new way of building out your solutioning and following best practices for API led. And when your team understands the benefit of API led and why we are building out our application network this way, then you have more efficiency in your design and in your whole application network. Because if I needed to change out, let's say the SQL database is an older database and I need to upgrade it. Let's pretend that's my AS400. All I have to do is add it here, add an API here, integrate that together with everybody else on the team. Instead of having to rewrite that whole application, I'm only changing out a small component here. Okay, that's the importance of API-led. One of the elements is changing things out. Okay, so in API-led, we have definitions of the kind of APIs that are out here. Now, API-led was actually a term, if you research it, it was a term that MuleSoft came up with. That was something that they, came up with the concept. And so in our world, on the MuleSoft side, we have them defined as an experience, process, or system API. You're going to have a ton of questions surrounding those three tiers. Now, I want to emphasize they are not network layers. So it's not like that you have to go to different network layers to reach these APIs. For those of you who are, understand like the network layering process. What they are just organizational units that when someone tells me we have a system API here that needs to be worked on or whatever, or we need to build a system API, I know that it's going to be focused on another system's needs. Like this system API is configured for that SQL database. We created that in the fundamental class. We created an API that is configured to get the flight data out of a database. Okay, so it's a system API. In the integration quest classes, we do a database that gets patient data. So it's interacting with that database. So everything about that application is to interact with the database to get the data out of it in a certain format. We get the database data, we get a record from that database, and the field names are something different than what we really need. So we transform that data. Everything that's done in that system API is a result of what that database is giving us and what we need for our next API that's going to use that data. Okay. And the other part, what that system API does is if that database has a unique username and password or a unique way of authenticating into that system. For example, Salesforce. Salesforce has a unique way they want us to integrate. You've got to have a security token. Okay. So there are different authentication methods. There are different security measures, and the data that comes out of it and the data that needs to go into it has to be very specific. So the system APIs, that's their job. I say they're the butler of a system. So they're going to be like, what do you need from this system? Oh, okay. Who are you? Let me get your credentials. Yeah, you can come in. If you don't provide any of that information to them, then they're not going to be able to come in. That's a system API. Okay. The process APIs, now they're like, I kind of think of them as the shopper. Okay. So they can kind of like, okay, what system APIs are needing to integrate with this? And it will grab data from that SQL database, maybe grab data from Google Maps, it'll grab data that it needs to do whatever functionality that process API needs. And a wise man told me once that they're like the objective. They work with the objects that are needed to be done for this business process. So they are the orchestration. They'll promote the logic. They'll, whatever it is. Like if we in the I'll use the airlines use case because most people are familiar with it, right? And so in that particular use case, we first created the system API that's the American airline. Then we created a process API And we brought in that process API, we had American, we had United, and we had American, United, and Delta. Okay. And so really what that would look like is you would have your three systems and a fake system API. We created an API here, and then we used another API that was already available, or an endpoint. We used a request. So we did it a little differently, but potentially you could have three system APIs, a Delta that would interact with the SOAP web service, so we could create three system APIs, and then they would all tie in together to that process API. Okay. So the way you would do it is, the process API is gathering all the data. Now, what do we need to do? We need to figure out, here's a list of all the flights available. And so it would, in turn, in that case, be providing all of the flight data together. That's its mission. In the integration quest course, what we do in our process API, it's a billing API. So we use that patient system API to bring in all of the patient information, but only the billing part. They don't need all of the patient's vitals. They only need the patient billing information. And then that gets sent to Salesforce. So again, the process is business processes, orchestration, manipulating, and bringing those different system APIs together. Okay. And then finally is the experience API. That is going to cater to the needs of whomever is requesting the data or interacting with the entire network. So for example, a cell phone has a different set of requirements that it needs to interact with a system. Like, when you're authenticating on your cell phone, and you might have a different way to authenticate than what you would do on your desktop, or what the needs are. And the language in which my desktop request would be coming in would be different, even from a cell phone or from a client application. Maybe it's a Salesforce request coming in from Salesforce. So Salesforce could potentially be on the experience side and the system side. If you're posting data to it, or if it's a request from a worker that is just doing, customer support, or it could even be me as a patient coming in to check my records, so there's various experiences. These different tiers are set up because the functionality at each level requires different policies to manage it and secure it. Different, like if any of these systems down here are an older system and it's very slow, and you have to really limit the number of requests coming in, then you're going to put a policy on that controls it, right? You're going to do extra things to make sure that that system is not overloaded. Okay, so there's different needs at different levels of the application network. But ultimately, it creates a larger application network of all of these systems integrating together. Okay, so that's kind of on the application networks. Any questions on some of that? Clarity or comments?
Not really. I use that diagram. So this is all new to me, obviously. I'm learning it. And people will ask, what are you doing now? What are you learning? And I basically try to describe this very chart, this very diagram that you have right here, and explain to them how the APIs are basically the rules and protocols that allow software to communicate with one another. And then I go into detail of, like, when you're on your cell phone, you're on your laptop, even when you're driving down the road in your new car and you got that little computer over there is communication with software. So there's APIs being implemented to make all of that happen and gain access to where they're supposed to be. And that's just kind of how I see it. So that was great explanation of it.
That is a great explanation. Really, that is. A couple of years ago, we went on a storm chasing tour.
Yep.
And while we were looking at what the meteorologists use to track and identify the potential for storms, the potential for tornadic storms, for the potential for, just mild storms and winds, and are all data points, are all APIs, are
Believe
all
it.
part of that whole API infrastructure.
Yep.
These little weather stations people have are integrated with an API. So
Yep.
yeah, it's all the behind the scenes components that communicate to one another.
Yep. Makes sense. They have to
Yeah.
gain access and get
Mhm.
permission, and yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. All right. So, when we understand this and we have this, and we get the um importance, we see the importance of this. Then in turn, we want to start building out in such a way that we are following API led principles. And so this brings us to one of our next concepts. And I don't have the percentage on this one, but it is one of the objectives in regards to having a team set up at each organization or each enterprise that is supportive of API led principles. Now, I'm not going to say that, in other words, there are times that there might be a quick solution that is not API led. That does happen. But for the most part, this is like, for example, company A just got spun up. They're using MuleSoft and um, they have other applications and they want to move into using a more modern setup and have it where it is, supportive of API led. So there are other team members, like the example I shared, that we don't need to learn MuleSoft. We could do it in a day because we know this other language, Python or .NET or whatever these other languages are. They can do it in oh, we got this. Well, no, that's not going to provide the standard that we want to go with. So the Center for Enablement concept is a team of different individuals from different parts of the company. Some of them high level executives. Some of them are going to be at the level of the developer and the architect and the QA, like the testing people. So they understand why we're doing things a certain way. The data management people, they will all be on this team. And the reason we want to do that is so that they understand the importance of this. And what MuleSoft says is you're not just building an API, it's not a project, it's really a product. Treat it like it's something that is going to be available for other people to use, not just like a solution. So, what this Center for Enablement does is it's like I said, a lot of companies don't have them. And I will tell you, if you do not have one, at least a small team set up for your Center for Enablement, you're setting yourself up for challenges. Okay, I've seen it. And so what happens is the importance of API led gets washed away. And so by having the Center for Enablement concept, and this is an objective on your exam, is to set this up so that you are positioning yourself to educate them, to teach them on on the API led concepts. Well, so what do? Do you have to just like start talking about it and teaching them, or doing spreadsheets or diagrams, or how can I let them know how important this is? Because they don't know. Well, there's a location in Anypoint Platform called Catalyst. It's a knowledge hub. And most people are unaware of this and sadly do not have access to it. Let me flip over to another account here because this one does not have access. Accounts that are trial accounts do not have access to this. So what does have access is our partner account does.
That
So,
makes sense. I've seen it at times, and then I haven't seen it. So now you just explained why that was happening.
yeah,
All right.
let me get my login credentials over here.
This is going to be a great way too, I feel like, to have the Center for Enablement if an employee was building out this API and it's building it out as a project, or a product, you're going to wind up, having employees leave, move on. That's going to help that situation because you don't know that you're going to be working for this company or, helping them years to come. And you just eliminated a lot of problems right there. I can see.
Oh, yeah,
When
it's
I
true.
see that, that's how I remember the Center for Enablement. That just alleviated issues with employees moving on for whatever reasons.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And it's like when you change how the IT departments have worked in the past. I'm just writing a point to point, or just doing a quick solution.
Hmm.
And you change over to a whole nother thought process. You need a team who understands it to keep it going.
Right.
And yes. Okay, so if those of you, if you're watching and you only have a trial account, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to see it. There are some trailheads that show you pictures of it, but you're going to see some things here that I'm about to share. Those of you that are on our partner orgs, excuse me, you will have access to it. Okay. So here's how you gain access to it. We're going to come up here, get logged into your account, do your authentications. And then you're going to come up here in the browser tab while you're logged in so that it works off, the cookies work off of your account that you logged into. And I want you to do catalyst.mulesoft.com. Okay. So you're going to go to this URL. Once you're logged in, go to the catalyst.mulesoft.com. I'm not sure if you have to have that index action at the end. Let me take mine off and see if it works without it. I think the catalyst.mulesoft.com is plenty. And when you hit enter, notice it just changed our URL. It forwarded us to knowledgehub.mulesoft.com.
Hmm.
So Catalyst will take you to Knowledge Hub. Okay, and it is just that. It's a hub, a huge library of knowledge. Okay, so let's agree to the terms here. And those of you on our team, we're going to go ahead. We're going to use Anypoint Platform for Select Cloud. So click on Anypoint Platform, Select Cloud. And this will, then we're going to do Anypoint Platform. If you are on European, for the European control plane, you would choose that one. Or if you're in GovCloud, you would choose that one. Ours is Anypoint Platform. And now it says, ask for access, or someone's wanting access, grant the access. It does not cost the customer anything to do this. So there's no additional fees. And in most cases, it automatically triggers you right into the Catalyst Knowledge Hub. Okay. Now, in here, you briefly go over this in the fundamental class. So your objectives on this are not as deep as you would think. You just kind of need to know what C4E is and what Catalyst is. Okay. So Catalyst is this knowledge hub. It's huge. Okay. You do not have to reinvent the wheel of how you're going to continue growing the presence of API led and your even how to do things. This is your how to do things library. So when we come in here, there's a bunch of things you can check out later, but what you want to do is come up to the playbooks at the top. Click on the playbooks. And this is going to show you the Catalyst methodology. Now, there are trailheads on Catalyst, and there is even a certification for Catalyst. So you can check this out. But what I want to show you here is there are 3 pillars that are defined in Catalyst. There's business outcomes, what actually is going to happen in someone's business, and how to go through those steps to make that happen. So we just click on business outcomes. We can see that there are 4 different phases represented here: planning, establishing it, building it, and measuring it. Okay, so how do I plan for this? How do I plan? I can agree on business outcomes. I can set up a reporting plan. I can hold business reviews. I can identify what metrics and key performance indicators to track, to measure success. Okay, so this is all in the business plan. When I'm starting to work with a new company and I want to start, there's usually a business process of going from they just signed a contract to start getting them set up. So this is kind of like the business outcomes playbook. Does every company follow this 100%? No, but this is where you can come to get ideas to help you build out and formulate a plan for their business outcomes. Okay. Let's go back to the playbooks. This is a pathway at the top. Go back to playbooks. The other pillar is technology. Okay. And in the area of technology, we've got the platform and we've got projects. So if we click on the platform, this is going to be a lot of the how to set certain things up, how to build out your platform architecture, how to set up your DevOps, how to, set up your common services, how to do testing. These are all how to set up a DevOps toolchain. So these are how-tos, and then how to manage it and watch it later, how to track it. So pretty much your whole process, anything relevant to the platform. Okay, define the platform vision. So if you click on one of these, let's just click on one of them, and you can see instructions of how you want to get started. Integration architect specification template. Okay, so if we clicked on that and we downloaded that, we could take a look at really a plan of how to build out. It's a template of how to build out their architecture. Okay. This is going to be a how-to step-by-step. I always tell people, sometimes when you're on a project or new on a company, you're going to feel alone, like it's all up to you. Well, you're not. You're not alone. There's a lot of resources out here of how to do certain things, what your architecture might look like. These are editable. You can take this as a template to start with and start building out your solution and visuals so that you are not having to reinvent the wheel. Okay. So these are all very helpful on your design. Okay. So that is the platform architecture. Let's go back up. Or go back. I guess we'll have to go back and then go back to the playbooks. And on the project side, now this is the technical side, how to set up a pipeline. I'm not seeing the click here, but it would take you into it. Manage projects per plan, your design, your develop, your test. You can go through all of this. And this, again, is part of the Knowledge Hub, from the planning it on the onset to establishing it and building it, and then just measuring the growth of it as you go forward. But I'm leading you to, let's go back to playbooks, this bottom section here. Okay, so again, remember your pillars: business, technology, organization. Now this in the organizational part is the Center for Enablement. Ah, okay, so here's our team, right? And everything in here is going to help us build out that team. Okay, and so also in this organization enablement category is internal support, how to get the most out of your support with MuleSoft. So there are details there, like, details on ticketing and, interacting if something's wrong on your platform. And then also training. So there's some training plans. What I'm doing with you all is our training plan. Okay, so Center for Enablement, let's click into that one. How to establish it. One of my favorite things to look at is the establishing a C4E mission and charter. Go ahead and click on that, because I think this is probably one of the most effective examples of, or I should say, the most effective documentation that really helped me understand the fullness of what a C4E should be. Now, not every company does it right, but if you do part of it, it's better than none of it. So let's look at, in this list, under the establishment for a C4E mission and charter, come down here to a C4E charter sample. Okay, and go ahead and click on that, and we'll download this. Okay, so in the C4E sample, you can start to see exactly how much this encompasses in a C4E. Now, for your certification, it's going to be high level, but for work, this matters, you know, or thinking along these lines are going to matter. So as a preparing as an architect, this would definitely be a high profile thing to really study on. But I want to bring you to the mission statement. You know, I really thought that this resonated with me quite a bit. And it is, the C4E is not another process or a roadblock, but their goal is to see that you're successful in what we're doing. Okay. Emphasizing enablement. Enablement meaning that we want the C4E team to be solid on the new way of doing things and how it should be done. And we want that to overflow when they leave. It's almost like discipleship. When you leave that C4E team and understand why you're creating a fragment, why you're creating your specification the way you are, why you're doing your data types how you are, why you're doing error handling like we're doing error handling, all of that, all of those different things that they're not used to, and they go back into their architect team or go back into their development team or even the stakeholders. They can share why we're doing it the way we're doing it, and the future proofing, the setting the company up for success and future proofing that. So again, you can read through some of this. I can also pop a link to this. Probably would have to do a download, but if you don't have access to this, let me know. This is well worth having because it'll show you the objectives. There are ways of even tracking. Is the team following API-led principles? There's KPIs, there's metrics. How many times are they reusing my fragment? Are they invoking my specification? Or do we have 5 people creating the same specification because they're not communicating and finding out that John already made one, Susie's making her own, this one over here, everybody's not doing the same thing. Center for Enablement will help them know that, oh, hey, we have a system API. You could use this one. So at any rate, check this out. This is what the C4E does. And there's roles, responsibilities, there's KPIs you can track, measuring success. I'm very strongly, we're doing that at our organization. We are going to be setting this up for measuring some of our success metrics. Success metrics.
Yep.
So anyway, there's a lot here, but I wanted you all to get the fullness of what the Center for Enablement. It's not just, okay, that's what, just a little team. No, it's pretty critical. Okay. And you can find out more and go through and find solutioning best practices in Knowledge Hub. Okay. So there's a lot there. In addition, there is another team that you probably have heard of. It is called the Center for Excellence. And people are like, oh, yeah, we've got that. When I talk about Center for Enablement, they're like, yeah, we're good. We got one. And then I'm like, oh, okay, what are they called? Who do you have? What do you have? And they're like, well, it's the Center of Excellence. Okay, that's great that they have that. But a Center of Excellence is a different team altogether. Center for Enablement, stakeholders, architects, developers, testers, understanding API-led principles. Center of Excellence is an expert on SQL database, is an expert on knowing how to connect to a data lake, is an expert on, they're experts in certain areas of the project. They may be your network wizard. They may be they are specialists in certain areas to make sure when a deployment's happening that everyone on the Center of Excellence is present, because if something breaks, they need to be there to fix it. That's what the Center of Excellence is. They're a different team altogether. There's a blog article out there. one of the members of the MuleSoft community wrote that really nails it. He does a great job in showing the difference between them. So know that as well. Okay. Sometimes small shops don't, have the time or don't spend an effort on really creating a strong team. And if they're, if the key players understand the concepts, then you have, like, for example, one of the contracts I was on, there were 4 of us, and so we were the center, the C4E, we were the center for enablement. And we had our stakeholders understanding what was going on. So, it might be a tiny team, but then on the other hand, it might be 20 people or so. I mean, it depends on your organization. But the idea behind it is using the tools that I shared with you of making sure that you are following those best practices. Okay. So that wraps up the Center for Enablement and Catalyst and some of the objectives regarding that. I think we'll go ahead and stop for today. We kind of got a little later start on our recording, so this recording is going to be just a little bit shorter. Tomorrow we're going to dive in and we will be coming into our design fundamentals, and I don't even want to get started on this one because we only have 8 minutes, being respectful of everyone's time. So we'll pick up tomorrow on RAML. So that'll be labeled session 2. And we'll pick up on RAML basics from there. Then we'll also, after we've gone over RAML quite a bit and RESTful, architectural style, different things in regards to that, requests, responses. Then we'll get into our Mule application structure. That's another objective. So tomorrow we'll probably cover this and probably one other objective too. So we'll be going through. Then, as a reminder, on Thursday of this week, I'm going to give you a challenge to work on from Thursday to the following Tuesday. Okay. And on Tuesday, you're going to be giving some kind of a presentation on an area that you really feel like you need to learn more about. So I'm not going to let you get away with picking a topic that you've got nailed really good. I want it to be something that you're unsure of, because that's the best way to conquer that objective. Okay, so that is going to be our plan. Okay?
Agreed. That's good.
All right. Very good, very good. So that's it for today. Everybody have a great day. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and I will see you. That concludes session 1. See you on session 2.